Sunday, and welcome to our weekly live Sunday chat. This is our monthly book club, and we are talking about Strange the Dreamer by Laini Taylor. Yeah, I don't know. It's going to be a lot. It was an interesting read for sure. So if any of you have read it, please feel free to jump into the discussion section and chat along with us. If not, there will be spoilers. Yes, please do.
There's only 3 of us this week. Help us.
Yes, we need more opinions to fill in the gaps here, but we're going to start off with our usual ratings of the book and go from there. So, Emma, you get to go first.
Yeah, so I definitely gave this 5 stars when I first read it, and I still am pretty sure that's what I'd rate it. It's been a little over a year since I read Strange the Dreamer, so it's not super fresh in my mind, but I remember really loving it. I do think the beginning is a little slow, but I also expect that from Laini Taylor books. I think I was very much prepared for it, but I really, really enjoyed it.
My dinner has arrived.
First, tell us what you thought of the book, and then each dinner.
Oh no, I read this book about 15 minutes ago. I finished it up, and I have a lot of feelings. Probably a 4-star read for me. I having read Daughter of Smoke and Bone and now this, I suspect maybe Laini Taylor's style is just not for me. And overall, I did enjoy it. But I have feelings.
Good. Feelings make for more interesting book clubs. For me, it was definitely a 5-star, and I resisted reading this one for a long time. I don't even know why. Every quarter is this is the one I'm going to read it. And I'm glad I waited till I could also read book 2. And I did initially read the first opening sequence with the moths and stuff, and it's this is stunning. I'm going to love this. And then I put it down for a year. I don't know, but it was really good, and I'm glad I finally read it. It definitely was slower at the beginning, but I think that's also a epic fantasy thing of those bigger stories with worlds that are more dissimilar from our own, and not even as traditional fantasy where you just kind of already know what the elves and the orcs are doing and all of that. So it needed a bit of that lead in for me, I think. But yeah, it was interesting. So I think the first question is kind of going to be, when did you start to get into the story? Because I know that's the thing with a lot of Laini Taylor's books. So slow to start.
I was more interested once Laszlo and Sarai met. You knew from a mile away that he was gonna see her in the dream, even though she didn't think he was gonna be able to. But I still got goosebumps when it happened, which was how I knew it was written well. And that was the first time that I was oh, I care about something now. Yeah.
I think for me, Sarai in general. Once we got out, Laszlo's first section, which was long, it was his whole life up until this point. I don't know, it was well written, but Sarai's whole story is really cool.
Yeah, so. I think I was more for the first half or so before they start interacting. I was more invested in Sarai's parts than Laszlo's.
Laszlo did have this immediate likability. I feel anyone who's reading a Laini Taylor book is probably a reader, capital A, capital R, a reader. And so he was instantly relatable, this person who just wants to read stories and wants to be frivolous and have adventures, but doesn't really know how he would even find himself stumbling into an adventure.
Yeah.
So I found that very likable. I wish it had been about 5 pages long.
Yeah, I do love the part at the very beginning, when it talks about his childhood and when the name of the city disappeared or whatever. I thought that was a really cool, it's a really cool setup of world building. She's really good at setting up a world that feels a lot bigger than what you ever see, and feels very full of wonder and whimsical and stuff.
Yeah,
She's really good at that.
And of him playing felt very cinematic. You could super easily imagine this little kid just running around fighting demons and stuff.
Yeah. And it was interesting seeing that moment turn into his life's work.
Yeah,
and all of that. They built it up really well.
Yeah,
it could have been faster. I don't know. And the stuff with someone's gonna remind me of his the guy who works at the library.
Oh yeah,
The jerk.
the like prince or something.
gold-
Theon? The prince?
Is that his name?
The golden haired prince? Yeah, Theon.
Okay.
Mhm.
Nero
believe-
is not the same.
I'll
Right.
admit, though, like I knew that like Laszlo and Sarai were going to eventually meet and there'd probably be a romance, but I was kind of shipping Laszlo and Theon.
Right? Right? He
I was
showed
like,
up on the
enemies to
page
lovers.
with like, oh, he's everything that Laszlo's not. And I was like, keep going. Interesting. I overall thought there was going to be much more. I'm assuming it's pronounced Theon, but spelled with a Y. I was expecting a lot more Theon based on the intro to the book, and so I found him really interesting, and I was kind of let down by how little of him there was in the book.
Mm-hmm.
And especially the idea of an arc of someone who thinks they're going to be the hero and get this big story, and then realizes at the end that it wasn't them at all.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
You do get a bit more of that arc going into book 2, but even then it was less than I expected it to be. Of like, he could have been less relevant and saved us a lot of pages.
Yeah, and it was really for someone who, because I didn't know anything about this book going in. I didn't know that there was going to be like these girls' POVs. So like I saw Theon on the first page and I was like, this guy is either a best friend or a rival or a lover. Like he's going to fit one of these 3 molds for sure. And then he didn't like at all. He was just there.
I did think it was interesting because like he's like the royal character in it, and like he's not all that important, which was interesting because usually like there's some royalty character in fantasy who's either like the main character or the love interest or the rival, like they're like really important to the story, and like him, and also him being royalty was kind of like secondary to his character too, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah, well, he had really similar beginnings to Laszlo, right?
So.
He was also just like found, I think.
Maybe.
I don't know. He's not. I honestly don't know. I'm not like on it. I'm not sure.
I thought his godmother was the queen or whatever. Whatever that was.
Possible. I don't remember.
It's all blurring together a little bit because I did read it over the last 2 days.
Very quickly.
Like N. Griswold, who said, I loved how lyrical the book was, but I restarted it 3 times before I got into it. I also restarted it a lot. But then I was like, I have to finish it. So. And Griswold also said, I kind of wish we didn't get Laszlo's whole life story before the adventure started, but once I got to the end, it made more sense why she started there.
Yeah. It was definitely important.
Yeah, it's not hard. Like, yeah, I guess there's that as well. But like his very beginnings, it's that like middle bit. I guess it was all important. It just could have been condensed. Of like him being found as a baby, good. Him forgetting the city's name, good. And then he has to like obsess about the city and build up his books, and Theon has to take them.
And that could have been like a shorter
Yeah.
section. Yeah. I could see that.
See, I could
not enjoy it, but
I could have done with less of the baby and more of the building up the passion.
did we get a lot of the baby though?
Just, it was probably about like 40 pages,
Really?
40 of my ebook pages of him being a child and just going from that to on track to be a monk, and then going from being on track to being a monk to being a librarian.
I guess it's because I technically restarted it as well. It's like the opening chapter of like Sarai's death and the moths trying to save her, I thought was stunning. And then after that, it's all like,
It's like,
Now-
so now there's no stakes. You know, like that like Twilight beginning where it's like, my life is at risk. Oh wait.
yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's like a very like intriguing beginning, but I think it is kind of an example of how like prologues aren't always good, especially if it like starts off with a bang and then gets really slow afterwards. Like I don't think it's the best prologue or whatever, because it's like it feels so separate from the next like 200 pages of the book.
You can also definitely see her editor being all like, it's a very slow first 200 pages. Please give us a prologue.
Yeah. And I was very confused by it, I will say. Like I spent like the rest of the book being like, so has that happened? Or like I kept thinking that the part of the problem of the City of Weep was going to be that like this blue person like fell out of this, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
thought
I was
that
like
200 years ago. I was very confused with the
Yeah.
timeline, honestly, pretty consistently. I was like, so are these people 200 years old or are they 15 years old?
But once I figured it out, having the prologue did add that extra level of tension of like, is it gonna be Sarai or not Ruby, but the other sister,
Sparrow.
Sparrow, who is dead now.
Yeah, for sure.
Like, and literally, like, as the city is lurching and like, I know they're both near an edge. It's just like, oh no!
How dare you? Yeah. I don't know.
All right, we're gonna move into some very, very fancy questions here. So Laszlo spends his childhood and adolescence with his nose in books. How does Laszlo's life in books prepare him for his extraordinary journey in the world outside the library?
Overall, not great. No, I think it just having that open-mindedness for sure.
It was also very cool if like he was looked down on for his whole career, and then all of a sudden he knows everything about these people, and and it's just one of them right away, and like gets the best job, and they all love him, which was kind of neat.
And I also think like he was like kind of able to like see things differently than everybody else, and he was like more ready to believe in like strange things, and so like he's like the one who's able to like guess like as like closer than anybody else like what the problem is, because he's like not thinking
that was me too.
the same like the same logical way that everyone else is.
However, knowing that and given that he was like the storyteller, I felt like he was a little lacking in self-awareness. I like, page whatever, right at the beginning when you find out that like, oh, there's this mystical power that some people have where they can pull things from dreams. And it was like, oh, so you're telling me that Laszlo is magic. Like he's one of these god spawn for sure. The only thing I don't know is how he's not blue. And so it felt like when he saw how easy it was to manipulate dreams and how he could notice this person, I had a hard time believing that he wouldn't stop to think like, why is this happening to me and not anyone else whose dreams she visits?
Yeah, I definitely never guessed that, but I never guessed anything.
I started to guess it, but it was definitely further into the book.
Yeah,
I don't remember when.
But it was actually the metalworking one. I thought that Theon was going to be the metalworking one, and that Laszlo was going to be the one who could pull things from dreams.
Yeah, it took me a little longer to figure it out, but I was like, wait a second.
Yeah.
He's one of those ones that disappeared.
Yeah.
I do think it's a cool twist. Whenever I do presentations at my job about like trends in young adult literature and like tropes and stuff, I always talk about like the lost princess trope, which was really popular a few years ago. And now it's like not so much because it became so predictable. It was like, oh, there's a missing princess and the main character is an orphan. The main character must be the princess. But I like always use that book I always use Strange the Dreamer as an example of like one that I feel like put kind of a twist on it, because like he's not like a missing prince.
They're not
like, it's
looking for him.
Yeah, they're not looking for him. Yeah, and so like it's not just like missing royalty as usual. Here, take the throne, even though you haven't been raised for this.
Yeah, it raises that like huge question of, there's probably thousands of them out there. Where are they and what are they doing?
And there is an additional depth to it, and this is going to be a little ironic, but this really isn't a spoiler because it is the POV of the first chapter of the next book. It's eventually we get one of the gods who has died, like the 5, but like her as a girl at the beginning, like before any of that happens. So, and you get some of that, like she's taken from her family and how all of that happens, and so there's all those different layers of stuff that is actually spoilers, but.
Yeah, for sure.
On that same note, go. I was going to change questions.
Oh, I was going to say, similar to what Anne Griswold had mentioned about spending so much time at the beginning being necessary. I felt, for me, spending so much time at the beginning made that twist obvious. So it's like, why did we spend all this time learning about what his boyhood was like if it wasn't relevant that he was this orphan and didn't know anything? And he had like the relating to the idea of the real name of the city being taken away because he didn't know his name and he didn't know the city's name. So it's like, so his birth is important.
Yeah, that's fair. So one of the other questions is, Errol Fane is described as a great man and also a good one. What is the difference between good and great? But mostly I want to talk about Errol Fane because I think he was an interesting character.
Yeah, I don't know that I would call him good or great. He's very complicated.
But you can see how, like, from the city's perspective, he is the great man who freed them.
Sure.
And he's done like great deeds or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I
necessarily
love
good.
how complicated it is of like, well, they can't go killing. There's just children up there. You can't go up there and kill them, but also like.
And like some are like one is his child, you know.
Yeah,
like,
but also like the gods were torturing them, and they weren't gonna stop.
Yeah. And Sarai being able to kind of bridge that gap between, like, is her sister Minya?
Yeah.
Yeah, so like Minya just sees him and all of them as the monsters that they see the gods as, whereas Sarai starts to like visiting their dreams and seeing who they are as people, and then visiting Errol Fane and like knowing he's her father, and it's a lot.
Yeah.
That part at the end wrecked me when he finally hugs his wife back and starts crying.
I also really liked his mom. His mom was really nice.
Yes. It makes me think of, you're talking about Minya, probably my favorite scene in the whole book was the one that we got from Minya's POV, where she was talking about like basically her origin story. We've gotten everyone else's backstories, and then she just ends it with repeating the phrase, I couldn't carry anymore. Like I took all I could carry. To me, there was so much backstory, and so much of it I didn't care about, and that like it felt like backstory that meant something. So that was just like one of the ones that I was like, oh, I do care that this was there.
I feel like that was a lot of backstory in all books always. It's like authors need to give backstories, and these characters had lives before, but sometimes it doesn't matter to this story.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's one of the things I've run into a lot, which it makes me think that maybe like Laini Taylor's writing and my reading just aren't the best fit, is that she does a lot of that. I mean, the tail end of Daughter of Smoke and Bone is just all a flashback, and I couldn't. It was like pulling out my teeth trying to read it because I didn't care. But
that was the hard part of that book.
Yeah, but those are like so crucial to her storytelling style, and I respect that is like important for her very lyrical fairy tale-esque story structure.
Yeah. I do like that in this one, at least it was weaved in a little bit more rather than, like the second half of the book is just a flashback.
Yeah, I really didn't love them in that one either, but it does feel like they were relevant in both books of like, you needed to know that backstory, but did I need it so immersively, so all at once?
All in one big chunk.
Yeah. We did do Daughter of Smoke and Bone as a book club, so if you want to watch that, I'm sure you can type in WordNerds Daughter of Smoke and Bone and it'll come up and you can see if I'm lying and actually liked Daughter of Smoke and Bone a ton back then, which I think I did, except for the end.
I think one of the more ridiculous questions from the group we have here, just to see what everyone thinks. But what do you think I'm not going to be able to pronounce this, ELILITHS, the circles on their stomachs, represent, and what do you think the color blue signifies?
I mean, honestly, I think Laini Taylor thought it would be cool, and so she did it. Which, respect. A lot of writing is done because it's cool. In terms of like the book as we have it, I think it's probably pretty easy to compare it to like the futures. Because I mean, if we're being real here, this was a very heteronormative society. All the men liked women, all the women wanted men and babies. So it represented. Was there?
Yeah, the like cladding girl and a warrior woman, I think.
Oh, I thought one of them was a guy.
No, I don't think so.
Okay. Well, at least there's that then. But overall, a lot of the women that we were exposed to wanted like babies and that kind of future. And for Sarai, that particularly was just like a future that she didn't get to have. And it was just like this painful reminder of that in like the place that would remind her the most that she doesn't get to have that.
Mm-hmm.
It's a nice piece of world building, if nothing else, of like building up that culture of, you know, what we is beyond the tragedy of it all.
Yeah, for sure. I don't know. I have so many feelings, and I've been trying for like the last hour to figure out how to articulate them all. But those kinds of details, like sometimes I felt like there was so much world that we never really delved into any of it. I don't know if that makes sense. I don't know.
Yeah. I really liked the world building in this and like how the god spawn work. And it like in the second book, it gets even bigger. There's a lot, but I don't know. It was well put together, and I like that I haven't read world building like it that I can think of. Like I don't get that very much anymore. Of like, oh, this is different.
Mm-hmm. I remember listening to, she was on an episode of First Draft podcast, and she was like talking about like how she world builds. And I thought it was really interesting because she talked about like one of the keys to world building for her in fantasy is to not put in too much detail, and to like, she talked about how like a lot of she has a lot of description, but she doesn't do a lot of explaining how the world works. Yeah. So like not a lot of detail in like explaining the world building, and how like instead she'll just like refer to things like that make you think like, oh, this world is bigger than like what we're seeing kind of thing. And I thought that was really cool because she was talking about a specific example in it, and I can't remember what it was, but it was a reference to some sort of like group of people or something, like something priest or something. I don't know, but it like made you think like, oh, there's like other people doing other things in this world. Or like, I like how like it just like very casually references the fact that they have two hearts.
Yeah.
Like, I had to like read it a couple of times before I was like, wait, do they have two hearts in this world? And like, she doesn't sit down and explain it, because why would the reader or why would the characters be like, by the way, we have two hearts in this world, because they don't know any differently, you know?
It just said like his hearts were beating.
Yeah.
The heart of his blood and the heart of his spirit.
And because like they did explain that there was like the spirit element there in passing, and then later it's all like, oh, this is important.
Yeah.
And I think Susan Dennard has talked about that too, because her Witchlands series does that a lot as well. She talked about how that's like much more of an adult fantasy thing, which Strange the Dreamer is adult, but it was marketed YA. I mean, everyone in there is grown ups pretty much. So, I was definitely a fan of that. I don't know. Sometimes I just felt like there was so much description that was just like throwing in. Like she Googled a list of flowers and just starts listing them all. And so a lot of times I was thinking, this isn't my style, and I had to like skim it, because not because I don't like lyrical writing, but because it just felt like it was obscuring everything.
Makes me want to talk about purple prose again, but Aaron's not here, so it's not worth it.
Yeah, I feel bad because I look up to Laini Taylor a lot, and I think she's so like cool and such a cool author, and like I totally get that like her writing is definitely good, and it's just not for me. But I found myself wishing that it was just scaled back some, like Roshni Chakshi's writing. Like you have that beautiful lyricism and a lot of like the really slow pacing and stuff, but I don't feel as often like I just don't know what's happening because there's so much description.
I definitely think Laini Taylor like walks a line between like beautiful lyrical writing and purple prose, and like occasionally she like goes a little too far to one side of it. And so like every once in a while I was like, oh, was this necessary?
Yeah, and that might work for like one of the like 5 people who are watching right now, and that's totally cool. It doesn't work for me all the time.
I think usually in general, like not Laini Taylor, but that kind of lyrical writing and a lot of description is not my thing. But I've always liked the Laini Taylor books.
Mhm.
But I think it's because of the world building and that like she
Yeah.
goes so off book from like
Mm-hmm.
standard fantasy.
Yeah, and it's like she's still creating like a really interesting world and a really interesting plot while having the really lyrical writing. So it's like easier for me to read rather than something where I'm like, cool, this was about nothing. Like nothing really happened. But yeah, I do like I love the book, and it's been a while since I read it, but I do remember having like a couple times where I had to like reread something and be like, wait, so what's going on? Because it was like so much like metaphor.
Honestly, a lot of times that started happening to me. I was like, this probably doesn't matter because this is another exposition scene. So I'm just going to keep reading. The only time I actually had to go back to read what was happening was at the very end with like all the explosion stuff. Because then I was like, oh,
This is
plot
important.
happening that I need to understand. It was so much like, for example, the scene where, sorry, I'm trying so hard to bring all my thoughts together. There's the scene where they meet in a dream for the first time or like when they're aware of meeting each other for the first time and they kiss and wake up instantly because it's morning. And then they know they're going to meet again in the next dream. And then we have to read like 5 chapters of nothing happening in between that. Like he goes and talks to people and they make fun of him. And then she goes and talks to her sisters and they make fun of her. And then he goes to the market and buys something. And then we get back to the dreaming. And it was just so.
Some of that was to like show them that other people, especially Laszlo, that like other people weren't going to be as down with this as they were.
I didn't feel like I needed that many pages to get that.
No. even just the one scene where Laszlo talks to one of his friends and they talk about how they just like straight up murder basically Sarai.
Yeah, they talked about like making blue soup. And he like looked at the one person and was like, surely she'll say something else. And she was like, as long as I don't have to clean it up.
Yeah.
That one is the lesbian, I think.
Really? I feel like that was a very, what year did this come out? Like 2016? That was a very
2017.
mid 2010s thing to do. Like, oh, my fantasy world is diverse. Look, I have this side couple who are gay.
And it's very much, and like I appreciate about this about the book, but it's also a thing that happened a lot then too, is that it was like very much like an allegory for like racism and hate, you know, like, without having to like actually have it be about that.
Yeah.
Or about real world racism. Yeah. Which I do think it does a very effective job of showing like when people are so set in their ways that like you can't reason with them. And I know she's talked about how like that was a big part of her like reasoning behind writing Minya, was to like show the type of character that like you cannot like no amount of logic will sway them from their like irrational like thoughts.
I don't know, with
Minya, people.
It's almost rational. It's like you get why she's like that, especially because she's like
you totally get why,
and like
but also that like you can't use logic to be like, but Minya,
no,
if we try to kill them all, we'll be proving them right.
I'm very interested in the Minya Laszlo dynamic of book 2. And while I hated to see Sarai die, I like instantly once I was like, oh, it's Sarai, she's dead. It was like, oh, Minya's gonna take her and make her do all the things she's been trying to make her do this whole time. And so suddenly like the second book's title made sense and I was very interested.
And really like this, the 2 books read as one book. That was very big and had to be split in 2. Like it's
I kept thinking to myself that I wished it was just one book and that they had made Laini Taylor condense for pacing, but that's not Laini Taylor's style, which I get.
Yeah, like there's stuff that the more that we get in book 2, we probably could have skipped, but I still liked it. But there's like Edgar's made a comment about the bird, and like and that something never came up again, and it does in book 2. But a lot of it is that like, oh, it feels like a lot of things were just dropped, and some of them probably were, but.
Yeah, and that probably is too a symptom of the fact that like this was marketed as a YA, and it's a pretty large expectation in YA that book 1 will stand alone. which it doesn't, because Laini Taylor doesn't have to sell a book that will stand alone. She can sell any series that she wants, because she's great and has a great fan base and stuff. So I did get to the end also, and I was like, ah.
I don't know. Do you think you'll attempt book 2 or not your thing?
It's probably like the Daughter of Smoke and Bone series where I tell myself I'm going to read book 2. And like, I really do think to myself, like, yeah, I would like to give that a try.
Not having to do it in 2 days might help. But
Yeah.
I think the fact that it's only 2 books makes me more likely to read the second. And I did, as much as I like Daughter of Smoke and Bone, I did like this book better. It was just like more my style, I think. So like I'm definitely likely to read it, where like Daughter of Smoke and Bone, like it's only one more book, it's only 3 books, but like I read the second book and like could not finish. Like by the time I like tried to read the third book, I was like, I can't do this any longer. I can't keep reading these long flowery books.
Yeah. If the library where I got my ebook has the next ebook, I will probably just like get it now and start, because like the problem comes in the waiting. If I wait any amount of time, I will stop caring. So I'll give it a try. I'm not gonna make myself finish it though if I'm not enjoying it. Yeah.
Fair.
Don't finish things you're not enjoying. 2K19. But the characters were all very compelling. Like, I can't imagine not wanting to know more about any one of those characters.
Yeah, like she did a better job than most of making me care about a lot of the secondary characters. Of like, I don't know, I'm always down for a magical sibling group, so beyond them. But
there's one of the first scenes where we are like talking, where Sarai is talking about Ruby. She said, she had a line about how Ruby was so very alive, and I was like, oh no, they're gonna kill Ruby. I like got sad, even though she hadn't even been on the page that much to that point. And that's just like such a clear sign of well-drawn characters.
yeah, and I really liked seeing how the 5 of them had like existed in this little cut-off world where they only had certain things and they had their ghost nannies, and if they hadn't had certain powers, they probably would have died.
Yeah.
They always have their own little dynamic, and Farrell and his many sisters.
Yeah.
Or I guess not sisters. I should not think of them as sisters.
Yeah. His friendly sisters. Yeah, I would love to have had. Obviously, I didn't want this book to be any longer, but I wish more of the time had been spent with them.
Yeah, I'm out of stuff to talk about.
I feel like I have so many things that I could just like word vomit, but also what it all boils down to is that like Laini Taylor's really cool, but not for me. And so I feel bad like going on and on about all the things I didn't like. Well, like there were things I did like, you know.
I want to find more fantasy like this of, I don't know, more grander scale fantasy than we see a lot of. Probably need to just branch out into adult. But because I do write, this kind of story is so interesting and like so imaginative. It doesn't. We get a lot of the same stuff over and over again, so it's a nice change of pace.
Because the only other adult fantasy we've read for book club was Queen of the Tearling, right?
And Darker Shade of Magic.
And the Bone Season.
And Vicious.
These are all fantasies that are marketed as YA, pretty much.
They're all ones with like crossover appeal.
Yeah, because I think the Bone Season is adult.
And
I
like
should
Victoria Schwab
read prior
was adult.
Orange Tree.
At my bookstore, they put all of that over here to YA.
Because like Strange the Dreamer is definitely sold in YA and shelved in YA,
Yeah.
but the rest of them are sold as adult.
Yeah.
Like we don't have them in my library or anything. We only do K through 12 stuff. So
Yeah. I think my Inti, they were like, you like these? You'll probably like this.
Yeah.
Let's
And that's
fit
fair.
near this.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I do like, if anyone, you guys or anybody else out there, wants any other books with like librarian main characters, I just read Sorcery of Thorns by Margaret Rogerson, and it is so good. And the main character is also like an apprentice librarian in that. And it like involves libraries more, which I really liked. Where like, because the libraries are like where they don't just store regular books, they store like magical books, basically, like grimoires or whatever.
Mm.
And like the grimoires can like turn into these like demon monster things. And so they have to like keep them like locked down and stuff. It's really good.
There's a series Rachel likes as well, and I feel like I've read the first one. I remember the name of like book 3. It's by Genevieve Cogman. The series is The Invisible Library.
Mm.
And like she's going to like different dimensions, all to like feed this one big library thing. I read the first one. It was kind of cool.
Yeah.
Oh, first one's just called The Invisible Library. There we go.
There you go.
The Archived by Victoria Schwab also uses libraries, and it's getting a TV show.
So I'm curious if that means it'll get a third book.
Yeah, hopefully.
I know that Goodreads has had a third book on it for a long time, so I guess she's like,
She said it got canceled, and then Goodreads
interesting.
will make it go away. But
Yeah,
if I was whoever owns those rights, and
yeah.
although I would have, if I had a B.E. Schwab series, I would have just run with it already anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So much of her stuff is coming to like
Yeah.
screens of all sizes.
What's that like?
Yeah.
Oh, book club.
Yeah, but this is book club, not the Victoria Schwab fan club. That is.
Or is it?
That I'm happy to turn it into any week.
I don't know what else happened. So much, but
So much, but also so little. It was a very like character driven. So like plot point wise, there weren't a ton of plot points. Oh, what was with the explosion? Why did that? Like, why? Who planned that? We got like no backstory on why that guy decided to blow that up. Just did I miss something?
He was like being kind of pushed aside, and he was all like, because everyone wanted to be the winner and whatever, but we didn't get enough. He was just kind of the explodey guy who couldn't tell what he was going to do.
The only person who drastically affected the plot at any point.
Yeah.
But
I don't even remember it.
that is the thing. Like he goes, while Laszlo is like nearby, but not in the laboratory, because Theon is suddenly not there for some reason. For some reason, Theon is not nearby, but Laszlo is, and this guy just like blows it up, and it ends up shooting the shard, the magical metal that he made from Laszlo's blood, into the ground and creates an earthquake that like topples the citadel from the sky. And the whole time I was like, this is very cool, but none of the major players made this happen. So like this book is ending with no one having done anything, which is fine if it's a romance, but like it wasn't. It's not a romance, it's a fantasy.
Fair.
And it probably like plays out with the fact that it's a duology that goes as one.
Yeah, like the ending is
That's
really more the midpoint. Yeah.
That's a logical midpoint of a story, but I found it disappointing as the ending of a 600-page book that I've just read. It's 600 ebook pages. I don't know how many paperback pages it is.
It was a big book.
It was big.
Yeah. I think I have it in both hardcover and ebook, and I read the ebook because like just carrying that hardcover was too much.
Yeah. We had a question from Anne Griswold. Do you think the god spawns should have tried to leave the Citadel? I wish they would have shown at least a failed attempt on a really bad day for one of them.
How would they have done it?
Yeah, I don't know how they would have.
I feel like we see the part where she like throws the plum off, and I felt like I would have like even just some indication of like some plan or something.
Yeah.
They
guess
weren't
we
just
have-
gonna sit up there and wait to die.
Yeah. If at one point like Ruby like tried to like tie sheets together to like
Or if like
climb down.
Beryl was like, well, maybe I can make clouds thick enough to bring us down.
Yeah.
I think they had said that they like tried to make something to walk on at one point though.
Mm.
Really?
Yeah, that did not work because of the clouds. Because I think like part of so much of their setup was just the waiting to die of like the beginning of, do you really think you're going to live long enough to ruin all of your slips kind of thing of, no, we're just waiting to die. That's all our lives are.
Or the idea of like, you know how the ghosts are like corporeal. Laszlo made out with a ghost. Like, could what's her name that starts with the M have had one of the ghosts take her down? Like,
Probably. That might have actually worked.
and I feel like she had enough rage that she should have at least tried that. Just go down with your ghost army and wreck people.
Can't think of any reason that wouldn't work. All right, do we wrap here?
Yeah, I guess so.
It was a rousing 40 minutes, guys.
Yeah. Not bad for a 3-person book club.
Yeah.
All right.
Definitely read it though if you like fantasy. Like this is a fantasy worth reading.
Unless you're Megan.
Unless you know Laini Taylor's not for you, then maybe don't.
And like she was pretty divisive. Like there's people you know, like it's not.
Yeah.
You'll get that sense pretty quickly.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, thank you all so much for joining us, and Griswold, as always, for reading the book. You are fabulous. Next month.
Next month is Red, White, and Royal Blue.
Yes, we will be announcing that officially on Tuesday. But there you go. You shut up so you get the news early. And of course, we will be back Tuesday and Thursday with our regular videos and all of that fun stuff. If you haven't already, don't forget to like and subscribe. We're here all the time, and we talk about a lot of book things. So until then, we will see you all next time. Bye. No,